Commander Taewoo stood on the bridge of his warship looking out at the stars. He had fought in more battles than most soldiers could count. For 30 years he had served the Galactic Defense Coalition with honor. His people, the Velkari, were known across the galaxy as the best warriors. When other species needed to learn how to fight, they studied Velkari tactics. Today felt different. Today the coalition was meeting with a new species that wanted to join their ranks. Humans, they called themselves. Taewoo had read their files and he was not impressed. These humans came from a small system called Sol. They had only learned to travel faster than light a few decades ago. Their ships looked rough and poorly made. Their weapons were basic. Even worse, their military seemed to have no real structure. They fought each other constantly on their home planet. "Sir, the human delegation has arrived," said his aide, a young Velkari officer named Kai-Ren. Tai-Wu nodded. "Show them to the meeting room. I suppose we should be polite, even if this is a waste of time." The meeting room was filled with representatives from different species. The Velkari sat in their usual spot at the head of the table. The Quellians, with their large heads and thin bodies, clustered together near the data screens. The massive Torkani delegates took up an entire side of the room. Then the humans walked in. Tai-Wu tried not to stare, but it was difficult. They were so small compared to most coalition species. Their skin was soft and pink, with no natural armor or scales. They looked fragile, like they might break if someone touched them too hard. The human leader was a woman named Captain Boram. She was shorter than Taewoo and had dark hair tied back in a simple style. Her uniform was plain blue with small metal badges. She walked with confidence, but Taewoo could see no weapons on her. How could she defend herself? "Greetings, Captain," Boram said in accented coalition standard. "We are honored to be here. Humanity wishes to join the fight against the Devourers." Admiral Kethvar, the coalition's military commander, leaned forward. He was a large Torkani with thick gray skin and small eyes. "Tell us why we should accept you. What can humans offer that we do not already have?" Captain Boram stood straighter. "We can offer our ships, our people, and our determination. We have studied the Devourer threat. We know they have consumed 12 star systems in the past 5 years. We want to help stop them." Taewoo almost laughed. "With respect, Captain, your species has no experience fighting the Devourers. You have barely mastered space travel. What makes you think you can face an enemy that has defeated some of our best fleets?" The human woman looked directly at him. Her eyes were dark brown and steady. "Because we have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know war. Fighting each other is not the same as organized military campaigns," Taewoo replied. "War requires discipline, strategy, and proper tactics. From what I have read, humans spend most of their time in chaotic conflicts with no clear objectives." Something flickered in Captain Boram's eyes, but she remained calm. "Perhaps our methods are different from yours, Commander. But we are here because we want to protect life. All life." Dr. Yoon Dahye, a Quellian scientist, spoke up. "I have reviewed human military history. It is very violent. Humans fight constantly, even when they have enough resources for everyone. This suggests poor decision-making abilities." Captain Boram turned to her. "We fight because we believe in things worth fighting for. Freedom, justice, the right to choose our own path. These ideas may seem strange to other species, but they are important to us." Admiral Kethvar made a rumbling sound. "Ideas do not win battles. Ships, weapons, and training win battles." "With respect, Admiral," said another human who had been quiet until now. He was introduced as Major Hansol. "Ideas are what make soldiers willing to use those ships and weapons. What makes them fight when the odds are against them." Taewoo studied the young human major. He was even smaller than Captain Boram, with a thin build and quick movements. "And what idea makes humans think they can succeed where veteran coalition forces have failed?" Major Hansol smiled, and something about that smile made Taewoo uncomfortable. "The idea that some things are more important than our own lives." The room fell silent. Most coalition species valued survival above all else. The idea of willingly dying for abstract concepts was difficult to understand. Admiral Kethvar finally spoke. The Devourers are not like enemies you have faced before. They are a hive mind. They adapt to every tactic we use. They learn from every battle. Many of our best commanders have fallen trying to stop them. Then maybe it's time to try something they haven't seen before. Captain Bo Ram said quietly. Tai-Wu felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in the way she said it that worried him. The humans seemed calm, but there was an energy. Underneath that, he couldn't identify. Dr. Day Hai pulled up a holographic display showing human military statistics. Humans have an unusually high casualty rate in their conflicts. This suggests poor strategic thinking. Major Hansol laughed, a sound that seemed out of place in the serious meeting. Or it suggests we don't give up easily. The debate continued for hours. The coalition representatives asked about human technology, training methods, and command structure. The answers were not impressive. Human ships were slower than Velkari vessels. Their weapons had less range than Quellian energy beams. Their soldiers trained for shorter periods than any other coalition species. But there was something about the humans that Tewu couldn't dismiss. They spoke about their determination with a certainty that bordered on fanaticism. When Admiral Kethvar described the horror of fighting the Devourers, Captain Boram didn't flinch. When Dr. Dahai showed images of consumed worlds, Major Hansol just nodded grimly. Finally, Admiral Kethvar made his decision. The coalition will accept human membership on a trial basis. You will provide 3 ships and their crews for the next Devourer engagement. Commander Tewu will serve as your military advisor. Tewu tried to hide his disappointment. Babysitting. Amateur soldiers was not how he had planned to spend his final years of service. After the meeting, he approached Captain Boram privately. I want you to understand something, he said. The Devourers are not like enemies from your history books. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They consume everything in their path. This is not a war you can win through courage alone. Captain Boram looked at him with those steady brown eyes. Thank you for the warning, Commander, but I think you misunderstand us. We're not planning to win through courage. Then how? She was quiet for a moment, then said, We're planning to win because the alternative is unacceptable. As Tewu watched her walk away, he felt that chill again. He had fought alongside many species over the years. He understood Velkari honor, Quellian logic, and Torkani strength. But humans were different. There was something in their minds that he couldn't grasp. 3 days later, Coalition scouts detected Devourer ships entering the Outer Rim. The war was coming, and Tewu would finally see what humans could do in a real battle. He hoped they would survive long enough to learn from their mistakes. The Devourer ships looked like nightmares come to life. Tewu watched them on his main screen and felt his stomach turn. Each vessel was a twisted mix of metal and flesh, pulsing with veins that carried unknown fluids. Some ships had mouths, full of grinding teeth. Others sprouted tentacles that reached out like hungry fingers. Form up in standard battle formation, Admiral Kethvar ordered over the communication system. Velkari ships take the center. Quellian vessels provide long-range support. Torkani ships guard the flanks. Tewu stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blade of Honor. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. Every movement was precise. Every order was followed without question. The coalition fleet moved into position like a perfectly choreographed dance. 200 ships arranged themselves in careful formation. Each captain knew exactly where to be and what to do. This was how civilized species fought wars. Human ships take position at the rear, Admiral Kethvar commanded. Provide support as needed. Tewu looked at the tactical display. The 3 human ships hung behind the main fleet. The UES Indomitable, Captain Boram's vessel, was larger than the other 2 but still smaller than most coalition ships. The UES Defiant and UES Resolute flanked it. Their formation looked loose, almost casual. Human vessels acknowledge, came Captain Boram's voice over the comm. She sounded perfectly calm, as if she were discussing the weather. The Devourers approached slowly. Intelligence reports said they liked to study their enemies before attacking. They would analyze coalition tactics, adapt their own strategies, then strike. It was a proven pattern that had worked against dozens of civilizations. "They're scanning us," reported Lieutenant Jackson, Taewoo's tactical officer. "Standard Devourer behavior. They're learning our ship configurations and weapon signatures." Taewoo nodded. "Let them look. They'll see the same formations that have protected the galaxy for centuries." The first Devourer ship moved forward. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of Taewoo's flagship. Its hull rippled with movement as if something alive squirmed beneath the surface. Other ships followed, spreading out in what looked like a random pattern. "They're not maintaining formation," observed Dr. Dahai from the science station. "This appears to be chaotic movement." "It only looks chaotic," Taewoo replied. "The Devourers use swarm tactics. Each ship acts independently, but they're all connected through their hive mind. They can coordinate perfectly without communication." Admiral Kethvar's voice boomed across the fleet channel. "All ships, prepare to engage. Fire on my mark." The coalition ships charged their weapons, energy built up in massive cannon arrays. Torpedo tubes loaded their deadly cargo. Everything was ready for a precise, coordinated strike. Mark. Light filled space as hundreds of weapons fired at once. Energy beams crossed the void in perfect patterns. Torpedoes streaked toward their targets like angry stars. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The beams struck the Devourer ships and simply stopped. The energy was absorbed into their hulls, making the organic sections glow brighter. The torpedoes hit and exploded, but the damage healed within seconds. "They've adapted," Dr. Dahai reported, though everyone could see it for themselves. "Their hulls are neutralizing our weapons." Taewoo felt his confidence shake. He had seen this before, but it was always shocking. The Devourers could change their bodies to resist any attack. In previous battles, it had taken hours of concentrated fire to overwhelm their adaptation abilities. The Devourer ships suddenly accelerated. They moved like living things, flowing around the coalition formation in ways that no normal ship could match. Their weapons were parts of their bodies: acid spitters, energy drains, and grasping claws that could tear through hull. "Metal. Maintain formation," Admiral Kethvar ordered. "Rotate weapon frequencies, don't let them adapt." But it was too late. The Devourers had studied them too well. They knew exactly how coalition ships moved, how they thought, how they fought. The swarm surrounded the neat formations and began tearing them apart. Tae-Woo. Quota's ship shook as acid ate through the hull. Around him, console displays flickered and died. The lights dimmed as power systems failed. His crew worked frantically, but they were fighting an enemy that changed faster than they could adapt. "Sir, we've lost main weapons," Lieutenant Jackson reported. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Life support failing." Through the chaos, Taewoo heard Admiral Kethvar's voice, strained but still commanding. "All ships fall back. Retreat to secondary positions." The order went against everything Taewoo believed in, but he knew it was right. They needed time to regroup to find new tactics. The coalition fleet began to pull back in good order, still maintaining discipline even in defeat. That quote s when the humans arrived. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace at maximum speed. Instead of joining the retreating formation, they flew directly into the middle of the Devourer swarm. Their engines burned so bright they looked like comets. "What are they doing?" Lieutenant Jackson gasped. Tae-Woo could only stare. The human ships weren't following any tactical doctrine he knew. They scattered in different directions, each one heading for the largest Devourer vessels. Their weapons were firing continuously, even though they had to know the enemy could adapt. Captain Boram's voice crackled over the comm system. "This is indomitable to all coalition ships. We're going in. If we don't make it out, it's been an honor." "Negative indomitable," Admiral Kethvar responded. "Fall back and regroup." "Sorry, Admiral," came Major Hansol's voice from one of the other human ships. "We didn't come here to run away." Tae-woo watched in horror as the UES Defiant rammed straight into a Devourer ship. The human vessel's shields failed, then its hull began to melt from acid weapons. But instead of retreating, the ship accelerated. Its captain drove it deep into the enemy vessel's body. "Defiant, report," Captain Boram called. "Hull breach in every section," came the reply. The voice was laughing, actually laughing. "Reactor going critical in 30 seconds. Anyone want to place bets on how big the explosion will be?" The reactor exploded, tearing both ships apart. The Devourer vessel's biomechanical parts scattered across space, twitching and dying. The other human ships didn't slow down. If anything, they fought harder. The UES Resolute lost its engines but kept firing, using its maneuvering thrusters to spin in place while its guns blazed. When a Devourer ship tried to grab it with tentacles, the human crew detonated their own torpedo magazine. Captain Boram's ship, the Indomitable, flew through the swarm like it was possessed. Her crew was screaming over the open channels, not in fear but in rage. They fired everything they had, then rammed damaged Devourer ships when their weapons ran out. "Multiple hull breaches," came a report from the Indomitable. "Artificial. Gravity failing. We've lost life support on decks 4 through 7. "Are we still shooting?" Captain Boram asked calmly. "Yes, ma'am." "Then we're still in the fight." Tae-woo couldn't believe what he was seeing. The humans were fighting like madmen. They showed no fear, no hesitation. When their ships were damaged, they used the damage as a weapon. When their crew members were injured, they kept fighting until they physically couldn't move. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. The Devourers had adapted to logical tactics. They knew how to counter careful strategy and coordinated attacks. But they had never faced an enemy that fought with pure, stubborn fury. The human ships moved in ways that made no sense, attacked targets that offered no tactical advantage, and refused to retreat even when defeat was certain. The Devourer swarm began to pull back. For the first time in recorded history, they retreated. From a battle they were winning. Captain Boram's ship limped out of the combat zone. Half its hull was missing, and it was trailing atmosphere and debris. But it was still moving, still fighting. "Coalition fleet, this is Indomitable," came her voice, now hoarse from shouting orders. "Enemy is withdrawing. Area secure." Tae-woo looked at his tactical display. The Devourers were indeed leaving. They had lost only a few ships, while the humans had sacrificed 2 of their 3 vessels. By any logical measure, the Devourers had won. But they were the ones running away. Admiral Kethvar's voice filled the comm channels. "All ships return to base. We need to analyze what just happened." As Tae-woo's ship limped back to the Coalition station, he kept thinking about what he had witnessed. The humans had no superior technology. They hadn't used brilliant tactics. They had simply refused to accept defeat. And that refusal had somehow made the Devourers afraid. For the first time in his 30-year career, Tae-woo wondered if he really understood what war was about. Dr. Yoon Da-hee walked through the medical bay of Coalition Station Alpha with her datapad in hand. As a Quellian xenopsychologist, she had been called in to study the human survivors from the battle. Her people were known for their logical minds and ability to understand other species. But these humans puzzled her. The medical bay was full of injured soldiers from different species. Velkari warriors lay in healing pods, their tough skin slowly regenerating. Torkani medics worked, on their own kind with efficient movements. Everyone was quiet, focused on recovery. Then Da-hai reached the human section. The noise hit her first. The humans were talking, laughing, and even singing. Some of them had lost arms or legs in the battle, but they didn't seem depressed. Instead, they were telling stories about the fight, making jokes about their injuries and planning what they would do when they got back to duty. "Excuse me," Da-hai said to a human medic. "I'm Dr. Da-hai. I'd like to interview some of your patients." The medic, whose name tag read Kim, smiled at her. "Sure thing, Doc, but you might want to start with Private Park over there. He's got the most interesting story." Da-hai approached the human called Park Jae-sung. He was lying in a medical bed with his right arm missing from the elbow down. According to his file, he had lost the limb while manually disconnecting a damaged reactor that was about to explode. His quick thinking had saved 12 other crew members. "Private Park," Dahai said, settling into a chair beside his bed. "I'm here to understand what happened during the battle. Can you tell me why you chose to sacrifice your arm to save others?" Park looked at her with bright eyes. "Sacrifice? I didn't sacrifice anything, Doc. I just did what needed to be done." "But you knew you would be severely injured, possibly killed. Why not find another solution?" Park thought for a moment. "Those people were my squad mates. We trained together, ate together, complained about officers together. When you spend that much time with people, they become family, and you protect family." Dahai made notes on her pad. Family was a concept that translated across most species, but humans seemed to apply it much more broadly than others. "But these people were not genetically related to you. Why risk your life for non-relatives?" "Genetics don't make family," Park said, looking confused by the question. "Shared experience does, trust does, caring about each other does." "That seems illogical. You had a higher probability of survival if you had followed evacuation procedures." Park laughed, and the sound was warm despite their serious conversation. "Doc, with respect, survival isn't everything. Living is about more than just staying alive." Dahai spent the next hour interviewing Park and other human survivors. Their answers consistently puzzled her. They spoke about concepts like honor, duty, and brotherhood, as if these abstract ideas were more important than their own well-being. One pilot, Lieutenant Kim Han-sol, had flown his fighter directly into a Devourer command ship. He had ejected at the last second and been rescued, but barely. When Dahai asked him why he had taken such a risk, his answer was simple. "Because it worked," he said. "One small ship took out something 50 times its size. That's a good trade." "But you could have died." "Yeah, probably. But if I hadn't tried, a lot more people would have died for sure." Dahai found their logic frustrating. "You're speaking about probabilities, but you're making decisions based on emotions. That's not rational." Lieutenant Han-sol grinned at her. "Who said anything about being rational? Sometimes the right thing to do is crazy." Later, Dahai met with Captain Boram in the station's conference room. The human captain looked tired, but alert. Her ship, the Indomitable, was being repaired in the station's main dock. The damage was so severe that most species would have scrapped the vessel, but the humans insisted it could be fixed. "Captain," Dahai began, "I'm trying to understand human combat psychology. Your crew fought with complete disregard for personal safety. This suggests either mental instability or poor training." Captain Boram poured herself a cup of something that smelled bitter. "Dr. Dahai, may I ask you a question? What do your people fight for?" "The Quellians fight for logical objectives: territory, resources, strategic advantage. And when you achieve those objectives, you stop fighting. Of course, continued conflict would be wasteful." Captain Boram nodded slowly. "That makes sense. But humans fight for different reasons. We fight for ideas that can't be measured or counted, such as freedom, the right to make our own choices, the protection of those who can't protect themselves, justice." Captain Boram leaned forward. "These things don't have strategic value in your sense, but they have value to us." Dahai made more notes. "These concepts exist only in your minds. They have no physical reality." "True, but that doesn't make them less real to us." Captain Boram smiled sadly. "Doctor, have you ever seen the Devourer worlds, the places they've consumed? I've studied the report. I've been to 3 of them. Nothing left but empty rock and metal. No life, no culture, no memory of what was there before. The Devourers don't just kill bodies. They erase everything that made a civilization matter." Dahai felt a chill despite the warm room. "That is unfortunate, but it's the natural order. Strong species survive, weak ones don't." "Is it natural?" Captain Boram asked. "Or is it just what happens when no one is willing to stand up and say this is wrong?" The conversation continued for 2 hours. Dahai asked about human military doctrine, training methods, and command structure. What she learned disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't calculate odds or minimize losses. Instead, they seemed to operate on a completely different principle. They fought for things they believed in, regardless of the cost. Your casualty rates are extremely high, Dahai pointed out. Human military history shows consistent losses that would be unacceptable to other species. Maybe, Captain Boram replied, but we're still here, and so are the people we've protected. At what cost? Your home planet has been at war for most of its recorded history. Yes, and because of those wars, we've learned something that peaceful species haven't. Which is? Captain Boram was quiet for a moment. We've learned that some things are worth dying for. And once you know that, really know it, death stops being the worst thing that can happen to you. Dahai left the interview feeling more confused than when she started. That evening, she compiled her report for the Coalition Council. Her findings were troubling. Humans appeared to be psychologically unstable by galactic standards. They made decisions based on abstract concepts rather than logical analysis. Their willingness to accept casualties was far beyond normal parameters. They showed signs of what other species would consider suicidal behavior. But there was something else. In her report, something that worried her even more. Human irrationality seemed to be their greatest strength. Their enemies couldn't predict them because they didn't follow predictable patterns. They couldn't be deterred because they weren't motivated by self-preservation. They couldn't be broken because they fought for ideas that existed beyond individual lives. High quote, as final recommendation surprised even her. Immediate integration of human forces into coalition command structure. These beings represent either the greatest military asset or the greatest threat the galaxy has ever seen. We must ensure they remain our allies. That night, Dahai couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her conversation with Captain Boram. The human had asked her a simple question. What would she be willing to die for? Dahai realized she didn't have an answer. In all her years of studying different species, she had never encountered people who lived their lives around ideas that couldn't be touched or measured. It was terrifying and amazing at the same time. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Devourer scouts had been detected in 12 different systems. The enemy was mobilizing for something big. Coalition intelligence estimated they were gathering the largest force in their history. Admiral Kethvar called an emergency meeting. We need to prepare for a major assault. All available ships and crews are being recalled to defensive positions. Commander Tewu looked grim. How many ships are we expecting them to bring? Best estimate is over 10,000 vessels. More than we've ever faced before. The room fell silent. Even with all coalition forces combined, they would be outnumbered, 3-1. Captain Boram spoke quietly. Where are they heading? Admiral Kethvar's voice was heavy. Earth. They're going to attack your home system. Dahai watched the human captain's face. There was no fear there, no despair, just a calm determination that made Dahai's skin crawl. Then we'll be ready for them, Captain Boram said simply. As the meeting broke up, Dahai caught Captain Boram's arm. Captain, you do understand what you're facing? This will be the largest devourer force ever assembled. The odds of survival are minimal. Captain Boram looked at her with those steady brown eyes. Doctor, you've been studying us for weeks. Haven't you figured it out yet? Figured out what? Humans don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because losing is unacceptable. As Dahai watched the human captain walk away, she finally understood why the Devourers had retreated from their last battle. They hadn't been beaten by superior tactics or better weapons. They had been beaten by something they couldn't comprehend, beings who would rather die than give up. Deep in the void between galaxies, something vast and ancient stirred. The entity that others called Prime Hunter was not a single being but a collective consciousness spanning millions of bioships. Every devourer vessel was both an individual creature and part of a greater mind that had existed for eons Prime Hunter remembered the first worlds it had consumed. Simple planets with basic life forms that offered no resistance. The pattern had been established then. Analyze, adapt, consume, move on. For millions of years, this method had never failed. Primitive species were easy. They fought with crude weapons and simple strategies. Prime Hunter would study their tactics for a few cycles, adapt its bioships to counter their technology, then overwhelm them with superior numbers and coordination. Advanced civilizations were more challenging but followed predictable patterns. They used logic, calculated odds, and made rational decisions about when to fight and when to retreat. Prime Hunter could model their behavior, predict their responses, and plan accordingly. The Velkari had been particularly entertaining. Their military discipline and honor codes made them predictable opponents. When faced with overwhelming odds, they would fight bravely but fall back in good order when defeat became inevitable. Prime Hunter had consumed 17 Velkari worlds using the same basic strategy. The Quellians were even easier. Their obsession with logic meant they would always choose the most rational course of action. Prime Hunter simply had to present them with scenarios where retreat was the logical choice, and they would abandon their positions without being forced. Even the mighty Torkani, for all their physical strength, followed understandable patterns. They valued their species' survival above all else, and would negotiate or withdraw when their continuation was threatened. But these humans were different. Prime Hunter replayed the recent battle data for the 1,000th time. The coalition forces had behaved exactly as predicted. When faced with adapted Devourer bioships, they had fought bravely, but begun an organized retreat when their weapons proved ineffective. Standard response: completely logical. Then the humans had arrived. Prime Hunter analyzed their approach vector. The 3 human ships had ignored all tactical doctrine. Instead of supporting the retreating coalition forces or attempting a coordinated strike, they had scattered and attacked individually. No formation, no coordination, no apparent strategy. Most disturbing of all, they had continued fighting when victory was impossible. The human ship designated Defiant had sustained critical damage that should have forced immediate withdrawal. Instead, its crew had accelerated into a ramming attack, using their own destruction as a weapon. Prime Hunter ran probability calculations on this behavior. The action made no tactical sense. The trade-off of 1 small ship for 1 Devourer vessel was mathematically insignificant, yet the humans had acted as if this sacrifice was not only acceptable, but necessary. The entity probed deeper into its memory banks, searching for similar behavior patterns among the thousands of species it had encountered. There were a few examples: parent creatures defending their offspring or individuals protecting their mating groups. But those were biological imperatives with clear survival advantages for the species. The humans seemed to fight for concepts that had no biological basis. They spoke of honor and freedom, as if these abstract ideas were physical things worth dying for. Their communication intercepts were full of references to protecting people they had never met, on worlds they had never seen. Prime Hunter found this deeply disturbing. For the first time in its existence, the collective consciousness experienced something like uncertainty. The humans had introduced a variable into warfare that couldn't be calculated: the willingness to accept certain death for uncertain gain. Prime Hunter reached out through the bio network, touching the minds of its subordinate entities. Fleet Commander designations Scar-Render, Bloodtide, and Voidclaw responded immediately. The human anomaly must be analyzed, Prime Hunter transmitted. Their behavior patterns are outside established parameters. Scar-Render, controlling a cluster of assault bioships, replied with confusion. These humans are weak. Their ships are primitive. Their weapons lack penetration power. We can consume them easily. Their physical capabilities are irrelevant, Prime Hunter responded. They fight in ways that cannot be predicted or countered through adaptation. Bloodtide, a specialist in psychological warfare, offered its analysis. Perhaps they are suffering from species-wide mental deficiency. Many primitive cultures develop irrational belief systems. No, Prime Hunter said firmly. I have reviewed their technological development and social structures. They are not primitive. They are choosing to behave irrationally. Voidclaw, the most experienced of the subordinate entities, transmitted concern. If they cannot be predicted, they cannot be efficiently consumed. This could compromise our expansion timeline. Prime Hunter considered this problem. The Devourer Collective had spent centuries planning their next major expansion. The galaxy was rich with life, and they had identified optimal consumption sequences that would provide maximum biomass with minimum energy expenditure. The humans threatened this plan. Their home system, Sol, was strategically located near several major shipping routes. If they continued to fight unpredictably, they could disrupt Devourer operations across multiple sectors. More importantly, their behavior might spread to other species. Prime Hunter had observed this phenomenon before. One species' tactical innovations being adopted by their allies. If humans taught other coalition species to fight irrationally, the entire consumption plan could be compromised. New directive. Prime Hunter transmitted to all Devourer forces. Human space is to be sterilized completely. No specimens to be preserved for study. No biomass to be harvested for integration. This was an unusual order. The Devourers typically preserved samples of each species they encountered, integrating useful biological traits into their own bioships. But Prime Hunter had decided that humans were too dangerous to preserve in any form. Render questioned the decision. Complete sterilization is wasteful. Human biomass could provide useful genetic material. Human genetics are contaminated with behavioral anomalies, Prime Hunter replied. Integration risk is too high. They must be eliminated entirely. The order went out across the Devourer fleet. Every bioship in the collective began redirecting toward human space. The largest force in Devourer history was assembling for a single purpose: the complete destruction of humanity. Prime Hunter calculated the odds of human survival at less than 0.001%. Even accounting for their unpredictable behavior, sheer numbers would overwhelm them. The collective was bringing enough firepower to sterilize every planet in the Sol system. But as Prime Hunter reviewed the battle data one more time, it noticed something troubling. In their final communications, the dying human crews had not pleaded for mercy or expressed despair. Instead, they had been laughing while their ships burned around them. This was beyond Prime Hunter's ability to understand. Fear, anger, even defiance, these were emotions it had encountered before. But joy in the face of certain death was completely alien to its experience. Prime Hunter made another decision that surprised its subordinates. Instead of the usual gradual approach, the collective would strike human space with maximum force and speed. No study phase, no adaptation period. Complete overwhelming assault from the moment they arrived. Why the change in doctrine? Voidclaw asked. Prime Hunter transmitted its analysis. Humans become more dangerous the longer they have to prepare. Their irrationality appears to be contagious. The longer we observe them, the more we risk contamination of our own tactical processes. The great fleet began to move. Millions of bioships emerged from the spaces between stars, converging on the small yellow star that humans called home. The force was so large that it bent space-time around itself, creating gravitational anomalies that would be detected long before the fleet arrived. Prime Hunter wanted the humans to know they were coming. It wanted them to feel despair as they realized the hopelessness of their situation. Perhaps facing certain extinction would force them to behave rationally, to surrender or flee rather than fight a battle they couldn't win. But even as Prime Hunter planned the assault, part of its vast consciousness remained troubled. The humans had done something no species had accomplished in millions of years. They had made the Devourers retreat from a battle they were winning, not through superior firepower or clever tactics, but through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. Prime Hunter pushed these concerns aside. Numbers would overwhelm any amount of determination. The humans would learn that some battles couldn't be won through stubbornness alone. The great fleet accelerated toward Sol, carrying enough destructive power to crack planets and boil away atmospheres. Behind them, they left empty space that had once contained thriving star systems. Ahead of them waited a small blue world where creatures called humans had decided that some things were worth dying for. Prime Hunter looked forward to proving them wrong. 6 months had passed since the first battle with the Devourers. Commander Taewoo stood on the bridge of his rebuilt flagship, watching the largest fleet in galactic history assemble around Earth. Ships from every coalition species had answered the call, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The Devourer force approaching Seoul was beyond anything they had prepared for. Long-range sensors showed a dark mass that stretched across light years of space. Coalition intelligence estimated over 10 million bioships, maybe more. Against this, humanity and its allies could field barely 12,000 vessels. "Final fleet count, sir," reported Lieutenant Jack Sun. 11,843 ships ready for battle. Taewoo nodded grimly. In normal circumstances, 12,000 ships would be considered a massive force. Today, it felt like a handful of pebbles thrown at a mountain. Admiral Cho Sung-min now commanded the combined human forces. He was younger than Taewoo had expected, with graying hair and calm eyes that reminded him of Captain Bo-Ram. The human admiral had requested Taewoo as his strategic advisor, an honor that both pleased and worried the Velkari commander. "Admiral," Taewoo said, approaching the human commander, "I've completed the tactical analysis. Even with perfect coordination and maximum efficiency, our victory probability is less than 2%. Admiral Sung-min looked up from his tactical displays. "What's the probability if we don't fight at all?" 0%. The Devourers will consume everything." "Then 2% is infinitely better than 0, the Admiral said calmly. "Besides, I think your calculations might be missing something." Taewoo frowned. "What factor could I have overlooked?" "You're calculating based on the assumption that we're trying to win a conventional battle. But this isn't conventional." Before Taewoo could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring throughout the fleet. The Devourer force had arrived at the edge of the solar system. The main screen lit up with sensor data, and Taewoo felt his breath catch. The enemy force was even larger than intelligence had estimated. Bioships stretched across space like a living tsunami, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Some were the size of asteroids, others as large as moons. "All ships, this is Admiral Sung-min," came the calm voice over fleet communications. "Enemy force has entered the system. All units move to intercept positions." The coalition fleet began to move. Velkari ships took point positions with their heavy armor and disciplined crews. Quellian vessels hung back to provide long-range fire support. Torkani battleships formed a solid defensive line and scattered throughout the formation. Human ships moved like wildcards. They didn't follow standard positioning doctrine. Some hung back with the support vessels. Others pushed forward with the assault ships. Their formation looked random, chaotic. "Human vessels are not maintaining proper formation," observed Dr. Dehai from her position at the science station. She had requested to observe the battle to continue her study of human psychology. "They're exactly where they need to be," Admiral Sung-min replied. The Devourer swarm approached slowly, just as they had in previous battles. They spread out across space, their bioships taking seemingly random positions that would allow them to adapt to any strategy the coalition might use. "They're analyzing our formations," Taewoo reported. "Standard Devourer behavior. They'll study our tactics for approximately 30 minutes, then attack." "Good," Admiral Sung-min said. "That gives us time to get everything ready." "Ready for what?" The Admiral activated a private communication channel that connected to every human ship in the fleet. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Sung-min. Today we fight not just for our own survival, but for every species that calls this galaxy home. The enemy thinks they understand us. Let's show them they're wrong." A chorus of acknowledgements came back, but Taewoo noticed something strange in the voices. The human crews sounded excited, almost eager. There was laughter mixed with the military responses. Captain Bo-Ram's voice came through clearly. "Indomitable ready, Admiral. All crew members send their regards to our new Devourer friends." "What are your regards?" Admiral Sung-min asked. "We've prepared a cultural exchange program for them, sir." Taewoo had no idea what that meant, but something in Captain Boram's tone made him nervous. The battle began with devastating efficiency. The Devourer swarm struck the Coalition fleet like a hammer blow. Their bioships had adapted not just to previous weapons, but to previous tactics. They scattered the neat formations, isolated individual ships, and began the systematic destruction of organized resistance. Tai-Wu watched his tactical displays with growing horror. The Velkari ships, pride of the galactic military, were being torn apart by creatures that regenerated faster than they could be damaged. Quellian energy weapons were absorbed and redirected back at their own ships. Even the mighty Torkani battleships were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than projected," Lieutenant Jackson reported. "At this rate, the fleet will be destroyed in less than 4 hours." "I know," Admiral Sungmin said calmly. "Right on schedule." "Schedule?" Tae-Woo stared at him. "Admiral, we're being slaughtered. This is not going according to any plan I'm aware of." "That's because you're thinking like a traditional military commander," the Admiral replied. "Sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemy think they're winning." Across the fleet, Coalition ships began to fall back in apparent disorder. The retreat looked panicked, disorganized. Ships scattered in all directions, abandoning formation and fleeing toward Earth. The Devourer swarm pursued eagerly. They had seen this pattern before, organized resistance crumbling into chaos. Soon they would have the human homeworld surrounded, and the consumption could begin. That quote s, when the humans revealed their true strategy. Admiral Sungmin activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All human vessels, initiate cultural exchange protocol. Let's teach our guests about human art." Suddenly, every human ship in the fleet began broadcasting. Not military communications, but music. Thousands of songs from human history filled the space around Earth. Classical symphonies, rock anthems, folk ballads, and electronic dance tracks all mixed together in a cacophony of sound. But it wasn't just music. Human ships began transmitting literature, poetry, paintings, sculptures, and movies. Millennia of human creativity poured across communication channels in a flood of cultural data. "What are they doing?" Dr. Dehai asked, staring at her instruments in confusion. The Devourer swarm suddenly stopped advancing. Their bioships began to shudder and convulse as the cultural transmissions hit their collective consciousness. The hive mind that had consumed countless civilizations was experiencing something it had never encountered before. Art created not for survival or reproduction, but for the pure joy of creation. Prime Hunter's voice echoed across Devourer communication, channels distorted and filled with static. "What is this? What are they transmitting?" "It's everything we are," Admiral Sungmin replied on an open channel. "Every song we've sung, every story we've told, every dream we've dreamed. You want to consume us? Then consume all of us." The cultural barrage intensified. Human ships began acting out historical battles, not as military exercises, but as performance, art. They danced through space while firing their weapons, creating patterns of light and movement that were both beautiful and deadly. Captain Boram's ship flew in a spiraling pattern that matched the rhythm of a classical waltz, her weapons firing in time with the music. Other human vessels followed suit, turning the battle into the largest performance in human history. The effect on the Devourer hive mind was catastrophic. Their collective consciousness had evolved to process tactical data and biological information. But human culture was something entirely different. Chaotic, emotional, irrational, and absolutely infectious. Devourer bioships began to malfunction as their pilots experienced human emotions for the first time. Fear, joy, love, anger, hope, and despair flooded through the hive mind in waves. Ships that had operated as part of a unified collective for millions of years suddenly found themselves thinking individual thoughts. "The hive mind is fragmenting," Dr. Dehai reported in amazement. "The Devourer ships are losing coordination. They're acting independently." "Phase 2, Admiral Sungmin announced. "All ships, attack pattern chaos. No formations, no coordination. Fight like humans." The remaining coalition ships abandoned all military doctrine. Instead of organized formations, they scattered across the battlefield in apparently random patterns. Valkyrie ships that had spent centuries perfecting disciplined tactics suddenly began fighting like berserkers. Quellian vessels, normally models of logical efficiency, started taking impossible risks for no tactical reason. Even the massive Torcani battleships joined the madness, using their bulk to ram enemy vessels while broadcasting human opera at maximum volume. The Devourer swarm, already reeling from the cultural assault, couldn't adapt to tactics that made no sense. Their bioships had evolved to counter logical strategies, but there was no logic to counter here. Ships attacked targets that offered no strategic value, defended positions that had no importance, and retreated from battles they were winning. Captain Boram's voice cut through the chaos. This is indomitable to all ships. Remember, we're not just fighting for victory. We're fighting for the right to be magnificently. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Seoul. Commander Tae Woo, now showing his age with silver streaks in his dark hair, walked slowly through the memorial garden on New Geneva. The galaxy was at peace, but the cost of that peace was written in stone monuments that stretched as far as he could see. Each monument told the story of a world that the Devourers had consumed before humanity's final victory. Tae Woo paused at one that bore the names of 3 billion Kalari, who had died when their homeworld was stripped bare. Another listed the artistic treasures lost when the Devourers consumed the cultural center of Veltar Prime. The war was over. The Devourer threat had ended not with their destruction, but with their transformation. The cultural infection that humans had spread during the final battle had permanently changed them. Former Devourer bioships now traveled the galaxy as individuals, many of them becoming artists, philosophers, and teachers. But victory had come at a terrible price. Tae-Woo reached the human section of the memorial garden and stopped. The monuments here were different from the others. Where other species listed names and numbers, the human memorials told stories. They spoke of courage, sacrifice, and hope. They reminded visitors that the people who died had lived full lives before their final moments. Earth itself was scarred beyond recognition. The planet's population had dropped from 8 billion to just over 3 billion during the war. Entire continents bore the marks of battles that had raged for months. Yet somehow, the humans were already rebuilding. Not just their cities and infrastructure, but their culture. The sound of laughter drew Tae Woo's attention. A group of human children was playing near one of the monuments, their voices bright and cheerful. Their teacher, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25, was telling them stories about the heroes whose names were carved in the stone. And then Captain Boram flew her ship right into the middle of the enemy fleet, the teacher was saying. She knew it was dangerous, but she also knew that sometimes you have to do dangerous things to protect the people you love. One of the children raised her hand. Miss Chen, why didn't she just run away? The teacher smiled. Because running away meant letting the bad things win. And Captain Boram believed that some things are more important than being safe. Tae Woo continued walking until he reached the central monument of the human section. It was a simple black stone pillar with a bronze plaque. The inscription was brief. Captain Lee Boram, UES Indomitable. She fought not because she was unafraid, but because fear was not enough to stop her. I thought I might find you here. Tae Woo turned to see Dr. Yoon Da-hai approaching. The Quellian scientist looked older too, her large eyes dimmed by years of studying the aftermath of war. She had spent the past 5 years documenting how human culture had spread throughout the galaxy, changing everything it touched. Dr. Da-hai, Tae Woo said with a slight bow. I didn't expect to see you on New Geneva. I'm here for the dedication ceremony tomorrow. The Coalition Council is officially establishing this as a site of galactic importance. She gestured at the memorial garden around them. All species are being asked to contribute to its maintenance. They walked together in comfortable silence, passing monuments that honored the dead from dozens of worlds. The garden was designed to be a place of reflection, where visitors could remember not just the cost of war, but the value of what had been protected. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had lost? Da-hai asked quietly. Tae-Woo considered the question. I think about it often. The devourers would have consumed everything. Every world, every culture, every idea that made life worth living. But that's not what I mean. Dahai stopped walking and looked at him. I mean, what would have happened to us? The survivors, I mean. If humanity had been destroyed, what kind of galaxy would we be living in now? Taewoo understood what she was asking. In the years since the war, human influence had spread far beyond their original territory. Coalition military doctrine now included creative chaos as a standard tactical option. Velkari honor codes had expanded to include concepts like sacrifice for strangers and fighting for ideals. Even the logical Quellians had begun incorporating emotional factors into their decision-making processes. We would have survived, Taewoo said finally, but we would have been poorer for it. Smaller. Somehow, they reached a viewing platform that overlooked the entire memorial garden. From this height, they could see the full scope of the monument. Thousands of stone markers arranged in patterns that formed images when viewed from above. The overall design showed a stylized tree with branches reaching toward the stars. The humans designed this layout, Dahai observed. Even their memorials tell stories. A gentle breeze carried the sound of music from somewhere in the garden. A human musician was playing a violin near one of the monuments, the melody sad but beautiful. Taewoo recognized the piece. It was one of the compositions that had been broadcast during the final battle, the music that had helped shatter the devourer hive mind. I have a confession to make, Dahai said suddenly. My final report on human psychology was incomplete. How so? I wrote about their willingness to die for abstract concepts, their apparent irrationality in combat, their tendency to fight for principles rather than practical objectives. She paused, watching the human children play in the distance. But I missed the most important thing about them. Which was? They don't just fight for what they believe, and they make others believe it too. Taewoo nodded slowly. He had seen this firsthand during the war. Human crews had a way of inspiring their alien allies to acts of courage that went beyond normal military training. Velkari soldiers had learned to sing human battle songs. Quellian scientists had started taking risks that defied logical analysis. Even Torkani warriors had begun talking about honor and justice as if these concepts had tactical value. Is that why you think we won? Taewoo asked. Partly, but I think there's something deeper. Dahai turned to face him fully. Commander, in all your years of military service, did you ever fight for something you couldn't define? Something that existed only because you chose to believe in it? Taewoo thought about this question for a long time. Before the war, his answer would have been no. Velkari military doctrine was based on tangible objectives: defending territory, protecting resources, maintaining order. But during the final battle, he had found himself fighting for something else entirely. Yes, he said quietly. During the last engagement, when everything seemed hopeless, I kept fighting because I believed that what we were doing mattered. Not because of any strategic objective, but because the alternative was unacceptable. That's what humans gave us, Dahai said. The ability to fight for things that matter even when we can't explain why they matter. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the memorial garden. In the distance, work crews were preparing for tomorrow's dedication ceremony. Representatives from every coalition species would gather to officially recognize this place as a symbol of galactic unity. I've been asked to teach at the new Coalition War College, Taewoo said. They want me to develop a curriculum on asymmetric warfare theory. Will you accept? I think so, though I'm not sure how to teach what we learned. How do you train officers to think irrationally when the situation requires it? Dahai smiled. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the lesson isn't about tactics or strategy. Maybe it's about teaching people that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. As they walked back toward the transport station, they passed a new monument that was still under construction. The plaque wasn't finished, but Taewoo could read enough of the inscription to understand what it commemorated. The Garden Worlds Project, he read aloud. What's that? Humanity's latest project, Dahai explained. They're establishing planets dedicated to preserving the cultures of species the Devourers consumed. Art, music, literature, philosophy, everything that made those civilizations unique. That must be incredibly expensive. What's the practical benefit? Dahai looked at him with an expression that was almost pity. Commander, after all this time, you still don't understand. There is no practical benefit. They're doing it because it's right. That night, Tewu sat in his quarters at the local coalition facility, working on his lesson plans for the War College. He had filled several pages with notes about human tactical innovations, their use of cultural warfare, and their ability to inspire allies. But none of it captured what he really wanted to teach. Finally, he wrote a single sentence at the top of a fresh page. I thought I knew battle until I saw humans fight. Below that, he began to write the real lesson. War is not about superior technology or better tactics. It is not about calculated risks or logical strategies. War is about what you are willing to sacrifice for what you believe in, and humans taught us that the strongest weapon in the universe is the absolute refusal to accept that some things cannot be done. He paused, thinking about Captain Bo-Ram's words during their first meeting. She had said humans were planning to win because the alternative was unacceptable. At the time, he had thought it was brilliantly impossible.